we get that addressed. Michelle will also be continuing the conversation afterwards on the forums, and will include all presentation slides and content. If you'd like to make a comment for the whole group to hear, send a direct chat to the host and presenter or all panelists, and I can take you off mute, or I can go ahead and read the question. So before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Michelle Wallace. Michelle Wallace actually helps me all the time in my job and is absurdly helpful personally. But aside from that, she leads Tableau Software's global social media programs. As a writer and an analyst, she is passionate about using data to better drive content decisions and foster an engaged social media community. She holds a BA in English from Western Washington University with a minor in astronomy. Prior to Tableau, Michelle was a magazine writer who covered local interests and histories around the United States. So I'm really excited for this. And with that, I can go ahead and pass the ball to Michelle.
Great. Thank you, Diego, for that awesome introduction. I am really excited for today's Think Data Thursday because we are going to do a deep dive into Tableau's own social media data program. Now, before I dive in, I just want to make sure you know how you can connect with me. Aside from Q&A, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Words by Wallace. And I'll also be publishing up my material from today's presentation at the link shown on the bottom right. It'll be up within the next 24 hours or so. And I'll be displaying this link throughout the presentation, so you don't need to worry too much about writing it down right now. So what's on the agenda today? Well, first, we are actually going to start by talking about Tableau's goals on social media. I actually believe pretty strongly in taking a goals-first approach when it comes to social media analytics. And the reason is because the social media data world is full of options. So it can be really easy to get distracted. And so defining your goals right from the get-go can really help you kind of know where to focus and begin your analysis. Now, I do want to be clear, I'm definitely not saying that you shouldn't take an iterative approach. Simply defining your goals from the beginning helps give you kind of a baseline, and from there you can iterate iterate your analysis from there, of course. After we talk about our goals, we'll dive into the mechanics themselves. We'll talk about data sources. We'll talk about what Tableau is using. Then I'm going to talk about some key questions and common themes that are always popping up in our analysis. From there, I'll talk a little bit about dashboarding and sharing, and I'll share an example of one of our own social media dashboards. And I'll bring it all together with a demonstration that showcases some of our favorite tips and tricks on social media. So we have a lot to cover. Let's dive right in. What are Tableau's goals on social media? Well, I want to illustrate by telling you a story. This is a conversation that happened on Twitter last summer. It was a Friday afternoon, and Eric here tweeted that he wanted to learn to use Tableau. And very quickly, Paul, who I think I saw on the call, and who's based in the UK, and then Emily, who's based in the US, they both jumped on to offer their support and resources. Now, Paul and Emily are both very active members of our community. In fact, they're both Tableau social media ambassadors. And notice that Tableau played no role in this conversation. This was people connecting with each other and supporting each other. And later on, I saw Eric tweet about his own Tableau work. This conversation epitomizes our goals on social media. Our primary goal on social media is community enablement. We believe that if we enable our community, we amplify the voices of people in that community, and we listen to the feedback of that community, we will have a much greater impact on social media than we could have through us alone. So this will come up as a common theme in the examples that you'll see. But let's go ahead and dive into the mechanics. As I mentioned, the social media data world is full of options. And understanding which data sources are available to you is kind of the first area where there's tons of different options. But even though there are a lot of different data sources available, they can all be grouped into 4 basic categories. Let's go through these. The first one is that you can take data directly from social media platforms themselves. Most of the major social media platforms offer data available for you to download as a flat file from the platform. So for instance, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube all offer this feature. And it's free, of course, if you're using those platforms. Now, the second option is similar, but maybe you're working with a third-party platform. For instance, maybe you're working with Hootsuite, Simply Measured, Crowd Booster. If you're working with a third-party social media platform, many of them offer data which you can work with directly. And usually this data comes in the source of like a flat file export, similar to the platforms themselves. But with third-party platforms, oftentimes you can see what's happening across multiple social media channels. Now, the third option is maybe you need live data. Well, working with a direct social media data provider like GNIP or DataSift is a great option if you want to get live access to data from multiple platforms. And finally, the fourth option is you can actually code your own solution. Tableau has the web data connector, and through that, any developer can code their own connection to an API-based social media data source, and then they can share their web data connectors out with the community. So these are the four main options when it comes to social media data sources. However, I kind of lied. There's actually a fifth hidden option. You can use your community. With the web data connector, people can share out the connections that they are building out to API-based data sources. And I've put some resources here for you if you're looking to get started specifically with social media web data connectors. Now, if you know of any more, please send them to me. Find me on Twitter and tweet them to me, or send them in the messages in the WebEx. I actually want to make this a living document, like sort of a repository. So I'd be happy to add in any other web data connectors that you know of. With all of these options, you might be wondering what Tableau uses. So we actually mix and match different types of data to help us accomplish our wide range of questions that we have. So the first area is we're working with some manual data. Specifically, we go to the in-platform data, specifically from Facebook and Twitter, and we are downloading some very specific reports from those platforms. Now, we put those reports into a central Excel workbook. And because these are manual data exports, we are very targeted with what we're actually maintaining. So for instance, on Facebook Insights, Facebook's native data platform, you can actually download like dozens of different reports. We just select the ones that we know are most important to us. So in our central Excel workbook, we have probably about 10 different tabs, all of which have been very specifically selected for their usefulness for what we're doing. And then along with the data from the platform comes in some data from third-party platforms, specifically Hootsuite and BuzzSumo. Hootsuite shows us what's happening across multiple social media platforms. And BuzzSumo helps us see where our content is getting shared on different social media platforms. Now, as I mentioned, we're very targeted with the content that we maintain manually, and it is very important to our analysis. But we also love automated data sources. So specifically, we're working with 3 of them. Google Analytics, which you'll see in action in a moment, but it's a really great way to see what people are sharing from your website on social media. A Facebook web data connector. So if you were here for last month's Think Data Thursday, you heard from Alex Ross. We actually use his web data connector to help us reduce the amount of manual data we're downloading from Facebook itself. And finally, we work with direct Twitter Firehose data. So I talked about social media data providers. We use GNIP to get access to live Twitter data directly from the Firehose, so it's not sampled. And all of these make up our suite of different data sources that our team is using. We're mixing and matching the data sources that work best for us. And then we publish all of these up to Tableau server because it's really important for us that people can self-serve with this data and answer their own questions. With that, I want to share a little bit about the actual analysis that we're doing with this data. We actually find that there are some specific common themes and questions that are always popping up in our analysis. So I figured I'd go through these 3 common themes because they're really applicable to social media data in general. So the first one is understanding our audience. This is especially important because of our community-based goals, but understanding your audience is really important for anyone involved in social media. So the top view on this visualization looks at the number of Facebook followers we have over time. And you'll notice it's actually broken down into different sources of followers. Followers that came from an organic source and followers that came from a paid source, for instance, an ad we might have run. And the bottom view, which is filterable by the top, has a little bit more detail. It's looking at hour by hour when our Facebook followers are actually online, which for obvious reasons is pretty important for us in terms of understanding our audience and knowing how we can serve them. The second common question that is always coming up is, how are people actually engaging with our content? And by this, I'd mean more than just tracking the number of likes, comments, and shares that you're getting. We want to ask deep questions about how people are engaging with our content so we can understand that experience better. Now, this view is really simple. It's just a bar chart of our most retweeted content, but its power comes from its interactivity. You'll see that there's a filter at the top that allows you to select an engagement metric. So we can change the engagement metric. So now, for instance, we're looking at the number of link clicks that we get on social media. And we can see that there are different characteristics of content that gets clicked on a lot versus retweeted a lot. Both are great goals to have in terms of engagement, but it's helpful to be able to look at your data from different angles like that. Finally, the third common question that we are always asking ourselves is, what is happening in the broader community outside of our own content? What is going on in terms of the broader community around us? And this obviously is very tied to our social media goals. So let's break down what you're seeing on this view. On the top, you see a timeline that has two important pieces of information on it. First, there is a gray area chart that shows the amount of traffic that we're getting to our website from social media sources. Now, in front of that, you see colored bars that shows the volume of content that we have actually posted on our blog, Facebook, and Twitter. So essentially, this view allows us to compare the volume of traffic we're getting from social media with the volume of content we're actually posting on social media. And of course, this top view is filterable. So you can see on the bottom, there are two views. If you select a certain day, you can see what we actually posted on that day. And you can then see what pages were actually visited on that day. We get lots of insights from this view in terms of what content is engaging to people, regardless of whether or not we are posting about it. So this is extremely important for us in terms of understanding our, what else is happening in our broader community. Now that you know what data we work with and have seen a couple of example visits, I want to take a moment to talk about dashboarding and sharing. Dashboarding and sharing is a really important part of our social media data program because we want to be able to have an impact with the analysis that we are doing. But with that, we have really two main goals when it comes to sharing our content. So first of all, we actually don't have a lot of dashboards on our team. We focus on developing a core set of dashboards that each serve a pretty specific purpose. So we have a set of just a handful of dashboards. But from there, our second goal is really enabling ad hoc analysis. We often find that the dashboards are simply a starting point for ad hoc analysis. So if we focus on developing a couple of key dashboards and then making our data structure really, really easy and making it easy for people to connect to that data and do their own work with it, those are accomplishing some of our biggest goals in terms of sharing our work. And with that, I want to share one of our own dashboards that we use on our team. This dashboard is a reporting and benchmarking dashboard. So our main audience is stakeholders and internal partners. And I'll walk you through how this dashboard works, but I want you to pay attention to two specific things. So first of all, this dashboard is basically needs to bring together a lot of information about things that are happening in many different areas of social media in a very compact space. So there are some specific design choices that we made for that reason. Now, the other thing I want you to pay attention to is the interactivity that's built into this view. because even though we're trying to surface, kind of what's happening at a glance, we wanted to take every opportunity we had to build in some interactivity without the viewer, getting lost in the weeds, and being able to, use that interactivity in a really useful way for them. So let's walk through what's going on in this dashboard. The first thing that you'll notice at the top is that there are, right off the bat, some configuration options for you. So the viewer can change the date range that's being shown on the view, or even change the time zone, so that they can select, just the data that they are interested in. From there, right away, you see that there are some lifetime views for both Facebook and Twitter. It's really important for us to ground and set up the context of what has happened over the lifetime of these channels, because that really helps set the stage for drilling into a more specific time range. Now we have multiple Twitter handles and Facebook accounts, and we also have a presence on Instagram, et cetera. And so we couldn't build out a lifetime view for all of them, and it wouldn't be all that useful in such a compact space. But we wanted a way to roll up those other metrics and bring them together at a glance. So we created this sidebar. And the sidebar shows other accounts and metrics and very quickly helps you see what is happening on those. Now, very quickly, you might be wondering what Everyone's Social is, and we'll talk about this later on in the dashboard. But Everyone's Social is a platform that we use internally at Tableau, and it's an employee social media platform. So a Tableau employee can get an Everyone's Social account, and then they can connect their social media accounts to it, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera. And then they can find content and share and schedule content on their own social media accounts. And that's really helpful for us in terms of, our community-based goals. We'd really like, the faces behind Tableau to be out there having conversations, not just Tableau official. So the other thing that you'll notice on this sidebar is that there is this light bulb here, which you can hover over and you can quickly see some important information that will guide your interaction through this dashboard. We have specific benchmarks for social media engagements and growth. And so here it calls out those benchmarks so that if the viewer has any questions, they can very quickly reference them right here. Now, below those lifetime views that we looked at, you'll see that from there, the dashboard gets divided into 3 main columns. And the experience through each of these columns is very similar. So first of all, a specific engagement metric is called out. We really want to bring engagements out onto the view and make this a focus in benchmarking. So you can quickly see, for instance, how many post shares we've gotten on Facebook over the course of the selected time, and you can see the average number of shares as well. Now below that, you'll see benchmarks themselves called out and highlighted whether or not we are meeting them. And then at the bottom, we've surfaced content level detail, which is pretty important to us. We really want our audience of this dashboard to be able to explore the content itself. So we've surfaced it right here. And they can do some interesting things, like they can select a different KPI to evaluate on this timeline or on this bar chart. So for instance, they can look at comments versus shares. And then say, for instance, someone was looking for a specific piece of content, they could even search for it here. So say, for instance, we've done a series of some Tableau 10 preview content. I could search for that content right here and very quickly see it in the dashboard. So this creates a very targeted, interactive experience for the viewer, but it also pulls together a lot of information about what is happening across multiple social media accounts. And now that you've had a chance to see one of our own dashboards, I want to bring this all together by building a dashboard live with some different social media data sources. And this will really illustrate some of the key tips and tricks that we love working with when it comes to social media data. So I've already preloaded some data sources, each of which looks at Facebook. And all of these data sources are coming from the data sources we publish to Tableau server. So this is sort of like an experience of if you were looking to do your own ad hoc analysis with the data that was published by our team to Tableau server. I'll walk through each of these data sources as we get to them. But let's just start with this one. This is a data source that is taken from Hootsuite, and it shows the number of followers that we have on Facebook every single day. So quite naturally, I could easily build a timeline with this. So I'm going to go ahead and take my date field and drag it out onto columns. I want to look at this on the day level. And then I'm going to take my total likes field and drag it to rows. Now it's pretty simple, but I've created a Facebook timeline of my number of total followers over time. We'll actually return to this timeline later, but I'm going to go ahead and look at content itself. I want to see what's going on with the content we are actually posting on Facebook. So I'm going to open a new tab for now and dig into that. So next, I'm going to look at this data source, Facebook WDC. So this is our Facebook Web Data Connector source. And it looks specifically at content being posted on our page, and it drills into engagement with that content itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my message field, which shows the message of the post, and I'm going to drag it out onto the view. I should probably exclude null messages. And then I'm going to take my post likes and drag it onto columns. I'll quickly sort, and now I can see my most liked content on Facebook. Now there's one other small detail I need to make to this view. So this Facebook Web Data Connector actually pulls in all content that's posted on our page, not just content that's posted by us, but also by visitors. So I really need to filter by posts just sent from us, and I have a field for author. All right. And now this view is helpful, but we have a lot of other engagement metrics like comments and shares. And it would be really great if I could build in some interactivity into this view so that I could dynamically change what the engagement metric is being shown on this view. So this is really one of my first favorite tips and tricks for working with social media data. It's building parameters to change what is shown on a view. And we can think of a parameter as simply a dynamic input in Tableau. You can give Tableau certain options, and then you can tell Tableau what to do if different options are selected. So the first step in this process is we just need to create the parameter itself. I right-click on the data pane and select Create Parameter. I'm going to call this parameter KPI. For data type, I'll select string. And for allowable values, I'm going to choose list. Now, I want to provide 3 different options. I'm going to call these, give these value 1, 2, and 3, because Tableau just needs a unique value for each one of them. But I can make this much more user-friendly by changing the display name of these. So I'm going to call these post comments and post likes and post shares. And of course, I'm not limited to just 3 options, but I really only need 3 for this specific use case. I'll go ahead and click OK. And then my new parameter is showing up right here in my data pane. I can click on it and show the parameter control. And here's where I get that great drop-down menu. I can change the KPI that's shown on the view, from comments to likes to shares. But the view isn't doing anything, right? So I've created this dynamic input, but the next thing I need to do is tell Tableau what to do with that input when it changes. So to do that, I need to create a calculated field from my parameter. I'm going to select my KPI parameter and choose Create Calculated Field. I'm going to call this field Show My KPI. And now I've already written out this calculation, and it's going to be posted to that link that I showed. But let's just walk through what this is actually doing, how it works. So the first thing it's doing is it's simply pointing Tableau to the parameter that I've created. And then it's listing out for Tableau when different inputs are selected, what to do, how to respond. So when input 1 is selected, it's telling Tableau to return my post comments field. But when input 2 is selected, it tells Tableau, return a different field, return post likes instead. I'll click OK. And then all I need to do is take my new field, Show My KPI, and replace my old field of post likes. Now you can see that the sort now gets messed up, so I'm going to sort again on the parameter, this new field itself. And so now every time I select a different engagement metric, it is showing the top posts by that engagement metric sorted dynamically. Now this is a pretty helpful interactive view, and interactivity is really valuable when you're working with social media data. But another big part of building interactivity into your dashboards is creating a really guided experience for your viewers, making it really easy to actually use that interactivity. So from here, I want to share a couple of small tips and tricks that can make a big difference when it comes to helping your user actually interact with interactive views. So the first thing is you'll notice that my axis has kind of an unhelpful label. It says show my KPI. I'd really like it to show what's actually being shown on the axis, right? I can actually take my parameter itself and I can drag it out onto the axis and change the label, make that label dynamic. Now I'll do a little bit of cleanup. For instance, I don't need this to actually say KPI up here. So I can right click and say hide field labels for columns. And then on this axis, I can also edit this and remove this other title that was previously showing up and wasn't dynamic. I'll click OK. And now I have a dynamic axis label as well. A small thing that makes a big difference. Now, another area that's really, really helpful for making a guided experience for your viewer is tooltips. Tooltips are a great opportunity to build in more information, layer in more information in a very user-friendly way without overwhelming the viewer. Now, these tooltips aren't bad, but there's some other things that there's more that I can do with these. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to actually take my date field and I'm going to bring it to detail. Because I want the viewer to very quickly be able to see when a post was actually sent. And then I'm going to open up my tooltip and I'm going to do some formatting. So first I'm going to take my date field and I'm actually going to put it at the top instead. I'm going to make it big. And then from there, I'm going to take my post message field. I'll label it post message. And I'm going to put my message in quotes. Underneath that, I want to show the parameter itself. So there's two different things that you'll see for the parameter that are getting surfaced in the tooltip. The first one is called parameters.kpi, and the second is some show my KPI. So the parameters.kpi is actually the label of the parameter, whereas some show my KPI is the actual value of that parameter. So let's go ahead and just mimic what we did with the post message above. I'll take my label, and then I'll take my value. I'll delete these things that we're not using anymore. And I'll do some simple formatting. Make these the same color. And pay attention to bolding. All right, so I think that my tooltip is ready. Now my tooltips are showing me very quickly the date that a piece of content was posted and very quickly surfacing the message of the post and the number of engagements it's gotten. And that, of course, is dynamic as well with that parameter. Now, there's one other thing that tooltips are really awesome for building in. You can actually build in instructions for your viewer in terms of how you want to interact, you want them to interact. And luckily for us, we have a really, really great opportunity with this specific data source. I actually have a field that is the link of the actual social media post. And I can bring that onto the detail on my view. And then I can create an action with this link. All I need to do that is open up the worksheet menu and select Actions. I'll select Add Action and choose URL. Now, for the name of the action, I'm going to call it Click to See the Post. And specifically, I want this to be a command, and you'll see why in just a moment. I want the action to run on menu, so this looks good. And then I simply need to select where the URL lives in my data source. So here, I'm just going to select the post link field and click OK. And now, when I go to my tooltip, if I click into it, I actually get a command that tells me to click to see that post. I've just created an experience where the viewer has very quickly been guided into how exactly I want them to interact with it. And how great is it that I could actually click and see the post itself? That's super helpful. It provides a lot more context. All right, so I've had a lot of fun looking at content. I'm going to call this Facebook posts. But now I want to bring these two views together. I'm going to start a dashboard, and I'm going to call this dashboard What's Happening on Facebook. I'll size this for my laptop, and I'm going to show my title on my dashboard. And then I'm going to take the timeline, drag it to the top, and bring the posts and drag it to the bottom. What I'd really like the timeline to do is filter the posts. So next I'm just going to select that timeline and use it as a filter. And now when I click a certain day, not that one, obviously, but I can see what was actually posted on that day. And I actually just blended data. These two visualizations are built with different data sources, but without having to write any code, I was able to blend them together simply because they have a common date field. And now there's one final thing that I want to do with this dashboard. And now I want to return to the timeline itself. Because if you remember, we have 3 different data sources, and I haven't yet worked with a third one. So I want to make this timeline a little bit more advanced. I'm going to go to my Facebook follower sources, data source, and this data source is from Facebook itself. What it does is it shows the number of new followers we're getting every single day, and it breaks them down into different sources where those followers came from. So what I'm going to do is simply take my new likes field, and I'm going to drag it out onto the view. And I see this new timeline get created. Now this is actually looking at new likes, not total likes. So I'm going to make a table calculation to turn this into a running total. Now once I do that, I really want these to be layered on top of each other. So I'm going to turn this into a dual axis timeline. I love dual axis timelines because they really help show like 2 things that are happening in context of each other. Now I should probably synchronize the axis as well so that this is really, really clear. Now, just for some context, basically these 2 views aren't really showing different things at this point. We're going to do some more with it. But this view is showing the number of new followers we've gotten, calculated by Facebook. And this is showing the number of new followers we have over time. And that data comes from Hootsuite. Now, you'll always see some small discrepancies in terms of different data sources. But the main reason these look different is simply because we don't have historic data before 2014. So the running total starts later. But what we want to do with this essentially is we want to actually make this timeline only show followers with certain characteristics. And so we have this field in our data source called source. And so what I want to do is show how you can use some metadata in your social media data to do some interesting grouping, because social media data has all kinds of different metrics available. And sometimes thinking creatively about what different metrics indicate and tell you about that data can help you do some really interesting grouping and analysis. It's based on metadata. So I'm going to take my source field and drag it onto the filter shelf. And now here, these are all sources that are defined by Facebook as different sources you can gain followers from. Now, I won't go too into the weeds here. Essentially, if you're interested in learning more about these sources, you can look them up online. There are some great resources that walk you through them. What I simply want to demonstrate is showing how we could filter just by followers who came from a paid source. So I'm going to select 2 sources that indicate a paid source of that follower. I'll select mobile ads, and I'll select sponsored story. And now I have a timeline that shows me my total number of followers, and specifically the followers that came from a paid source. The last thing that I want to do is I want to do similar tooltips to the other view that I built. So I'm going to open up my tooltips, and I'll just do some formatting similar to what we did before. I want to create a consistent experience. I'm going to make the date field big and put it at the top. Oh, excuse me, I actually opened up the wrong tooltip. I want to open up the tooltips for all here when I'm doing a dual axis. I'll open up that tooltip, take my date field, put it on the top. I'll have my total likes field and my sum of total likes. Now I need to change the name of this field because this is, I'm going to call this likes from paid sources. Do some really quick formatting on this. And the last thing that I want to do is I actually want to put a command into this tooltip itself. I'm going to say click to see what happened on that day. This is a little detail that makes a very big difference in terms of creating that guided experience. Now I'm going to go back to my dashboard and I'm going to walk through how a viewer could interact with it. So the first thing that I do when I come to this dashboard, I want to know what's happening on Facebook. I can look at certain days and see what's, how many total likes we have on that day, how many likes from paid sources we have. And then I could actually, I'm actually automatically prompted to click to see what happened on that day. So say I click on that one, or let's choose one that has a post. So I click to see what happened on April 2nd. And then very quickly, I'm able to see the post itself that we sent. I can click into it. I can even click to see the post. And I can even change the KPI that I'm evaluating for that post to see how many comments it's gotten, for instance. So very quickly, what I've done is I've blended multiple data sources. I've built some interactivity using parameters. And I've also done a tiny bit of work with metadata. We did this all by writing only a single calculation. So this really kind of pulls together some of my favorite tips and tricks that we are always pulling on in our analysis. I'm going to turn it over to Q&A very soon, but I want to make sure that you have access to a couple of resources. Again, all of these slides will be published so you can access them again. So here is a templatized version of the calculation that I built for that parameter. There are also a couple of other tutorials that I would recommend checking out to kind of provide more context around the material we discussed today. The first one is a presentation on kind of the basics of getting started with social media data, and you can find it here. The second one is a webinar run by Alex Ross, who also ran last month's Think Data Thursday, and it dives in specifically to web data connectors, and it talks about social data as well as a couple of other web-based data sources. And there are a couple of resources that I'm constantly drawing on from when I'm working with social media data. So the first one to be aware of is this link will take you to kind of our main landing page for social media analytics resources at Tableau. It will have some example dashboards, some customer stories, and I would recommend checking it out if you want to dive in more. The second resource that I have here is a blog post on regular expressions. We didn't have time to go into it, but social media data has a lot of string-based data, and regular expressions can help you do some really, really cool things with this data. So I would recommend checking it out. If you're interested in learning more about parameters, I would recommend checking out this link, which also takes you to a blog post about that. It does a great job of explaining how parameters work and how you can quickly get started with them. And lastly, I wanted to direct you to this blog post by one of our social media ambassadors, Keith. It actually is a great tutorial in terms of how to deal with time zone conversions in dashboards. And this can be helpful for anyone who is working with multiple social media data sources and multiple data sources and doing blending. But it specifically comes up a lot in social media data because we are doing so much blending. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Diego for question moderation, but I hope you all connect with me on Twitter, and you're also welcome to reach out to me over email.
Perfect. If you want to just leave it right on that slide, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. That was really awesome. It looks like we do have a couple of people with questions.
Great.
So first, I will go ahead and see if I can unmute Paul. Make him a panelist. There we go. Paul, are you able to speak? Do you have a microphone attached? Oh, actually, you know what, Michelle?
Mm-hmm.
I think you might be the one to unmute him.
Oh,
So
that's right. I'll go ahead and jump right back into the presentation. Do you want me to just pass the baton back to you?
oh, he actually, it looks like he might be typing in. Oh, no, yeah, sure. If you want to give me presenter, that's fine. All right, and let me see. Yeah, still not. Paul, if you wouldn't mind actually just typing your question in. Not sure what's going on, but we have Brian Purcell who asks, do you analyze web/social data for competitors and/or partners, i.e. Alteryx? If so, how do you get the data?
That's a good question. So we are pulling, I mentioned that we have Twitter data that's collected through GNIP. And so how that works is essentially in GNIP, we can set up parameters for the types of tweets we want to pull in. And we do pull in tweets looking at Tableau, looking at competitors, partners, as well as general hashtags that we're interested in that space. So things like hashtag data viz, hashtag business intelligence. And then, once we set up those parameters, basically we get returned from the Twitter fire hose all of the tweets that use, mention that person or use that hashtag. So essentially, what we're doing is we're doing that on Twitter specifically, and we've set that up. We are collecting all tweets that mention, competitors and partners and specific hashtags.
And some other questions. Let's see where those went. Are you able to see that box with the questions, Michelle?
I think so.
Mine just disappeared. Because there should be. I know we got a couple more there. All right, there we go. All right, so next question we have, hi Michelle, how do you export data from Instagram into Tableau? Is there anything you would recommend? Thank you.
Instagram. I'm pretty sure that Instagram doesn't have analytics in its platform. I think that Pinterest does. So, when it comes to looking at, pulling from the platforms themselves, like I said, I'm pretty sure that Instagram is not offering it. One thing that you could look into is third-party platforms, or also look at DataSift or GNIP. I don't know off the top of my head if either of them have access to Instagram, but for a source like that where it's not offering that the data in platform, it's good to take a look and see if you can get it through like a social media data provider.
Awesome. We have Osmi asking. Oh, they said thank you. So they said, so do we get the data from Facebook Excel report? Was the question. So do they? Yeah. Is that where you're getting the data from?
Yes. So so I showed 3 different Facebook data sources. And so we're actually, pulling Facebook data from a couple of different areas. When it comes to looking at the data that's actually in the platform, Facebook Insights, that's what, Facebook's analytics interface is. And it offers like dozens of different, like when you download your data, there's dozens of tabs. And so what we're doing is we are looking at, in Facebook Insights, the page level data. And then from there, we pull specific tabs from that report. Specifically, I think we're looking at, there's one that looks at like when your followers are online. And that's the one I showed for that box and whisker plot. And then I think there's 1 or 2 more, but like we've selected basically 2 to 3 from, all of those options. And then we also have some Facebook data from Hootsuite and from the Web Data Connector.
Awesome. And let's see. Brian asks, can you spell the Twitter Firehouse service, Gannett? I cannot find it.
Yeah, it's GNIP.
Oh, GNIP. That's a tough one to also pronounce.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Do we have any other? Believe that's it. Okay, cool. So finishing up just a couple minutes early. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. The conversation can continue on our forums afterwards. We'll go ahead and post up the video on YouTube and tweet about it. And so anybody who wants to review anything that was covered in this presentation, feel free to jump online afterwards, and I'm sure Michelle will also be monitoring the responses.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today, Diego.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle, and everybody else. We'll see you next time.